Are landlords evil? Have you ever thought about investing in real estate and stock because you thought landlords are evil? I am a landlord. I'm a generation immigrant. I'm Peruvian and I'm a landlord. I invest out of state and invest in state of California.
Yeah, and I'm also an immigrant from Mexico, and I'm also an out of state investor. I've had people say it to me where like, "Oh, but that's bad. Like being an investor, is bad and everything." So we want to talk about a little bit of it, both from the point of view of both sides as the landlord and as the renter, because we think that obviously real estate is a great way to build wealth and build multiple sources of income. But I think we both have the same mindset of having a harmony in being a landlord and also thinking about your tenant.
Yeah, I'm going to stress that housing is not a luxury, it's a necessity. People need food, healthcare, and shelter to survive. And that is why it becomes so complicated when we put two people on two teams, right? We have landlords and tenants. And it all comes down to perceived or real power influence because when you put somebody, a landlord, to approve or deny where somebody lives or raises rents, it enforces the rules of how somebody else, the tenant, can live on their own space.
I definitely believe, yeah, housing is a must. In a perfect world, like it wouldn't be something that we'd have to worry about. And the way that I see it is that by also getting into the real estate game, I could do little things that can help the housing situation, because whether you're in it or not, corporations are still going to like take up, become landlords. I think when you have real estate investors that have a little bit more compassion, we could start, making a little bit of change. Obviously, we are fighting a big, big thing like corporations.
Yeah. So one of the things that as a tenant, me myself, I also been, a renter for majority of my life actually. Are one of the things that are keeping on my mind is like most of our income, like the average American, is stagnant, right? Like unless you're trying to increase your income via side hustles or moving jobs, going to back to school, I mean, it's other skills and then changing your job, then your income is pretty much fixed, but rent increases yearly. So when you're thinking about from a tenant and then you're kind of like stuck with the same income and then your rent increases yearly, that feels unfair. There feels like there's a disconnect of power as well. And then in your mind, or at least in the mind of people, homeownership feels so out of reach as well. And it feels like a goal that you're never going to get. So it is a symbolic system of people feel like they're paying somebody else's mortgage instead of being able to afford their own.
The income is staying the same, but meanwhile, like cost is growing. And we've seen that these past few years where the cost of living, groceries, everything is getting more expensive. Our health insurance, people are there, having to sign up. It's already gone way up. The insurance has gone up and everything's going up. But the thing that, like you just mentioned, is not going up is, like minimum wage is not gone up. And more often is a lot of people are not getting like, raises at their job, even to combat the inflation. Like it's definitely something to think about.
And not to say there's not bad landlords out there. Most people have, landlords that sometimes ignore repairs. They don't return the security deposits. They show up unannounced, or they break the rules that tenants have, like raising the rent after just a few months or things that have happened like that. I remember there was a viral TikTok video about this landlord that showed up into the tenants and announced trying to view the unit for possible other tenants. And that was totally infringing upon the tenant's right of receiving at least 24-hour notice before showing up and just totally imposing themselves into their lifestyles because even though it is your house who you own, like you're the owner of the house, there's a person living there, building their lives, having their family, cooking, cleaning. Like this is their quarters of living as well. And not to say they have more rights in that, but you do have to follow the rules and regulations and not just give us a bad name and making tenants experiencing bad experiences.
Yeah, that there's definitely a lot of bad landlords out there that give us a bad name. And it's definitely been common, hence what like the slumlord, right? But those types of stories, they're easily promoted, right? Because negative news travels faster than positive news. Like no one hears about the landlord that gave, Thanksgiving turkeys or gave out gift cards for the end of the year. You'll hear about the landlords that raise the rent like crazy, or they come in and they take over of a property and then they hike up the rent because they put some paint on it or whatever. And so you definitely hear a lot of those stories of people just like kicking people out, throwing their stuff away. Like, yeah, there's a lot of bad landlords out there. So I'm not surprised, and I don't blame people for their negative views of landlords, because I've definitely had some iffy landlords, but because of those experiences, I definitely keep that in mind as a landlord, because I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be a slumlord. And when I take over these properties, I've seen where the previous landlord definitely could have done better. Well, now I have the property, now I have the tenants. I'm going to do better from now on.
Yeah, and I think when Violetta and I decided to go into investing in real estate, we were not thinking, I want to profit off people that need shelter. It was more of like adding a passive income stream so we can retire easily. It's about financial security. It's about commitment to responsible investments. It's not about making every single penny out of one house. And I want to mention all the costs that people don't know about landlordship or investing in real estate, like our mortgage, our property taxes, our repairs, our replacements. If you have HOA fees or legal compliances, property management fees, tenant turnover, just like we just had an episode about how our frustration and challenges include tenant turnover. Sometimes that could be thousands of dollars for just one unit, right? Sometimes the numbers are tight, and just like the cost of living rises for the tenant, so does for the landlord. So insurances get higher every year. Property taxes go up every year. Just labor of fixing something goes up every year with the tariffs and the lumber changes. Over COVID, we've seen a spike of like 20 to 30% in lumber prices, and things that used to cost, 20 30% less now cost 20 to 30% more. And these are costs that we incur as well, not only the tenants.
That's definitely part of doing real estate, is that you take some of this risk, of this burden of maintaining that property. Uh, and renters can just be like, they just have that set. And although, yeah, like rent can go up every year as well, it's kind of like a set monthly thing, right? Your rent is 2200 a month, for at least the term of that lease, whether it be 1 year or 2 years or whatever. That's what you're going to pay every month. And with a on our side, 1 month can be like, oh, well, a pipe broke, so now I got to fix it. So now that takes some extra expenses, some extra costs. Or at the end of the year, my insurance goes up, or all of a sudden the city came and assessed the value of the properties and they went up. So, like, it's a little bit more of variables as a landlord that you have to consider. And that is like, and I get it, a lot of people are like, well, you wanted to be a landlord, that's your problem, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, we do. And it's not to kind of like be like, oh, poor landlord. It's just to kind of like educate and make people aware of like all that goes into being a landlord. Because, like you said, you see that you pay 2200 a month, and then you think that we're just like rolling in cash, when in reality, at least for the average real estate investor that is just like a small timer like us, or just a regular investor, not the big corporations. They have a whole bunch of other stuff. For the most part, yeah, we are slowly just making multiple sources of income and slowly building wealth, not rolling around in cash.
And just like there are bad landlords, there are also bad tenants. So
Mhm.
there are tenants that come and damage your property, tenants that stop paying, tenants that do not communicate, tenants that break the lease, and then tenants that are evicted because we call them so professional tenants, right? Tenants with rights that they sometimes are hostile, irresponsible, and sometimes deceptive. So the landlord being a landlord, it is a high responsibility and you have to have control of some kind of investment, like in your investment and regulations in your state or in your counties. Rules and regulations are going to dictate how you can behave. And that's the reason why we do have strong regulations, right? Like I live in California, we have one of the most regulated tenant landlord relationships as well. But sometimes it can feel one sided when the system just assumes that the landlords are predatory and the tenants are the ones that are vulnerable. Even evictions, the justified evictions can take months or even years. And estates like mine.
For the most part, we just try to be a good landlord. And for the most part, a tenant usually tries to be good, right? Because it'll hit their credit score and affect them for future housing. So I want to like not get too lost in the extremes. Don't let the media get you scared from getting into investing in real estate. The other thing is the mentality, because the American dream is to own a house, right? To own your own home. So when you see a landlord that has a property and multiple properties, yeah, it's easy to get this mentality that they're super wealthy or whatever. But again, you gotta take into account all the expenses that go into it, the debt. We have mortgages on them for the most part, at least the average real estate investor. The idea can be like, "Oh, look at that rich real estate investor." Like, yeah, like when people and like with Lynn, when she says, "Oh, I have these properties," like you're like, "Oh, wow, she's rich." But she's not there yet.
Also, like you and I are both landlords, first gen immigrants, and we invest in like housing grants like Section 8 and then affordable housing. In my experience, also, like the majority of the houses that I have right now have been acquired. Prior to me acquiring them, they were not livable, right?
Mhm.
They were not up to code. And to say that I'm stealing from the first home buyer, like I'm trying to make a way that these homes are not for first home buyers, right? They are for investors because there's no person that's going to be in seeing a dilapidated house and be like, oh, I'm gonna buy that and fix it up so I can live in it. It's more like these investors that are looking into deploying huge amounts of cash into this house and make it livable again, making great, like making it nice and being able to rent it out for two Section 8 voucher tenants or two lower housing income tenants. We both Billet and I invest in C type neighborhoods, which usually it's blue collar and people of lower household incomes. And we are proud that to make these houses nice and livable and having just people that are going to be treating it like their own house.
And it's easy to make real estate investing kind of like cold. And we talked a little bit about this with Sammy, one of our first guests. So I'll link that episode below, and it's episode 8. But we were talking about how a lot of investors can go into this and not thinking about the human factor. You're dealing with a person that they are building a life in your property. I have like a single mom with a kid. I have a small family with 2 little kids, and like all these are families and just people, right, that are making a life in your property. But a lot of times, and that's where you also get kind of like the negative view of the landlord, is that they just see it as a transaction, right? Give me money and you get to stay at my property. If not, then I kick you out, right? And that's where it kind of like can go wrong when you have investors that have that mindset. And it's one of the reasons that, me and Lynn are out here to try to, like, one, obviously, show that our community can invest in real estate, but also kind of do a little mindset shift of being a more empathetic and compassionate investor. Something that you have to think about, that you are affecting these people. So, for example, in the neighborhoods that I invest in, and I know it's kind of like going to be controversial because a lot of people are like, oh, don't accept late payments of the rent or whatever. But the reality is, a lot of my tenants are, as I mentioned, in blue collar jobs or in low income households. So anything can kind of mess up their paychecks, right? If they get sick, then they're going to be short a little bit. But my tenants always have historically made the effort to pay at least something, right? And so if I just start charging them like late fees, like $50, and then this increasing it, like that's not helpful to me or my tenants, right? My tenants are already like paycheck to paycheck. And then I add another fee on top of, the rent and everything like that. Like that's just putting them into a deeper hole. And at the end of the day, then they have to leave because they didn't pay the late fees, but they're paying, like, trying to keep up with the rent and everything. So it's things like that that you have to kind of think about, like, how is it going to affect my tenants if I decide that, you know what, I can wait to fix one thing, like you're this is somebody that's living in your house. Like, how is it going to affect them because you don't want to carry the cost of, like, fixing an electrical issue or a plumbing issue, or whatever. Um, that's things that we have to think about as investors, that our tenants are people and they have lives.
Take in consideration, I had many, not particularly me, but many friends that had tenants in which like the furnace went out or the AC unit went out, and then they have to put their tenants in a hotel while we have the repairs because we live in a winter
Mhm.
heavy market. Those for those landlords, it was a no-brainer. And then I know many of us would have just thought, oh, like they could stay with a family member or something, like while it's getting fixed. But with the community that we're trying to build, Violetta and I, like an ethically landlord would not even question that, right? Like would make sure that that gets fixed in winter and freezing temperatures, and then make sure we put the tenants in a hotel room while this is getting fixed and over. And it does it suck for the landlord side that to have an expected expense like that, it may maybe mess up your cash flow for the whole year. Yes, it does suck, but we're not gonna just make like compromise our ability to care for that human being that's we're putting out, right?
I've definitely had the furnace thing, and my property managers quickly took them like space heaters and stuff because it definitely was in the winter time and stuff. And like, luckily, got fixed right away within the day, because things like that is, you got to send like emergency contractor or whatever. So it got turned over, and same thing with the flooding. Like, immediately just gotta go take care of it. And yeah, those are just like costs of the landlord, and a good landlord is going to keep that in mind as well, that at the end of the day you are dealing with people. A lot of people are like, why are you becoming a real estate investor? You're being part of the problem and everything like that. But I feel, and I see it as I'm being part of the solution because of the type of mindsets that I'm trying to promote and the things that I do in my own properties. Because I have three right now. Like, if another landlord, like a slum lord, took over those, like, then that's six people, six lives, six families that would be under those slumlords and struggling. But I have them, and I know that I am being as ethical as possible, being compassionate and all that. So I'm being actually part of the solution. And like Lynn was saying, part of the solution as well, making these really run down houses livable and fulfilling a need. There's needed housing, and she's investing in them and making them available to for people to build their lives in. But yeah, something that you will feel guilty at the beginning, but I think you just learn to not necessarily like just be like, oh, well, or just forget about it. It's just you kind of like learn to live with it because there are going to be people that come at you for being a real estate investor. But I know how I am. Lynn knows how she is, and little small changes is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. People would always need a place to live. So you can learn how to invest in real estate with us as well. You can tune in and listen to our episodes. And there's many types of investing in real estate. You can be a private money lender. You can invest in syndications. You can do other types of investing where you're not directly the landlord, but you can still have your investments work for you.
I see it as just another, like a business. Like I always like to compare it to like someone just starting a regular business. You're still running a business with people because you are paying people, and there's obviously businesses out there like these bigger corporations that don't even pay a livable wage, and business owners get a bad rep in that way as well. Same thing with landlords. We get that bad rep as well. But there's little things that we can control, like, the things we already kind of mentioned in this episode of just being a little bit more ethical as possible. But in the same idea with a business, making sure that, hey, you're treating your employees good, that you're providing a livable wage and being an ethical business owner as well. So that's what I like to compare it to. But yeah, I don't see this negative view going anywhere, especially now with the house shortage and affordability going crazy. Like, I don't see this view changing at all.
Well, if you like this episode, please like and subscribe. If you're listening this through the holidays, happy holidays for you. And we'll see you next week.